Okay, so this is the first episode of our podcast, which is nameless, but primarily we'll be talking about psychology as it relates to what I do, which is fitness coaching, health and fitness coaching, and what Henry does, which he will tell you about himself. But first topic of the call is going to be, first topic of this podcast is going to be what is sports and exercise psychology? And I'll hand it over to Henry to explain.
Thanks, George. Yeah, good to be on the Nameless podcast. But yeah, so what is sports psychology? There's different ways of defining this. Ultimately, what are sports psychologists hired for? Most of the time, it's to get performance gains through psychological processes, ultimately in sport through the athlete. You can look at that in two different ways. So firstly, direct. So you can think about the work that a sports psychologist will do directly with the athlete. So this will be around psychological interventions that are relative to that sport, which are important for that sport.
How could just to interrupt you, how could a intervention psychologically be more relevant to one sport over another? Would you say? Have you got an example for that?
Yeah, you think about the context which different sports have. You might look at the cycle of events in a sport. So in cricket, for example, a batter is typically got a 30-second cycle of he faces the ball and then he's got all that time in between until the next ball's faced. Whereas tennis, for example, you're looking at returning the ball and then a couple of seconds later it's coming back. So what that person is doing in performance, will look very different. And then obviously you've got then, if you look at it in terms of, you've got preparation and reflection, and a common sort of term that's used in sports psychology is plan, do, review, can have impact in those different areas of pre-performance, in performance, post-performance.
Okay, cool. You were talking about how, as a sports psychologist, you are hired for two main reasons. One is more direct with the client, let's say, and one's more indirect. What's it look like, your role with the direct versus indirect?
Yeah, so just to clear that one up, it'd be more in terms of how the psychologist goes about their work there, not necessarily being some jobs you may be more hired to work on an indirect level than a direct, but usually there's a mix between the two. For indirect, this is looking at the people around the athlete, so we call these stakeholders, so the coaches, the other support staff. You're using words like environment and culture. Are we creating the right environment for the athlete in training in order to thrive, in order to develop the mental skills which are necessary for performing in that sport? But also you're looking at things like the language used between the coaches and to the athlete, that they're all on the same page. If you look at all of that as a psychologist working one way with the athlete and the coaches and the support staff around the coaches, certainly more with more experienced psychologists, they're also working the other way with the organisation, and is the processes in that organisation set up well for all of those lot to thrive. You see a lot of sports psychologists going into business now as well, all labelled under performance psychology.
A general good definition to go with is you're brought in to increase performance.
I'll just say I've gone heavily into performance there. Many of the jobs they're looking for results. There's also a whole section I've not talked about there, which is to do with well-being and mental health. Definitely a contemporary trend now, which is a lot of organisations understand that if you get the well-being side right and you create an environment which allow the athlete to be in a good state of well-being, then that's going to translate over to performance.
Because you've been brought in on for teams, but you've also been brought in with individuals where you've made rapid changes to their performance. Have you found examples, let's say with cricket, where a shift in the well-being has led to the improved performance itself?
Definitely. It's often in cricket, for example, you often see people not really switching off, not really stopping thinking about cricket, but often actually thinking that it's the right thing to do, that they're actually preparing themselves well by staying in it. And on a Friday night before a game on the Saturday, like really thinking about, after a bad performance, say, thinking lots about that and still thinking about it 2 or 3 days later. And that really does tie into well-being, because your quality of life really does decrease if you are constantly thinking about your sport.
It's funny that you bring that up, because there's an example I always use with clients when I'm trying to talk to them about that integration of exercise with their actual values. Because most of the time people think, okay, I'm locking in with George for 12 weeks. All I'm thinking about is training and getting in shape and doing the stuff. And it's the exact opposite. We're never really trying to just make it fitness or your life. It's integrating it in. And the example I always use is from you when you were playing cricket, when you were a lot younger, and that you had a bit of a streak of bad results, even though you were putting in the work. And then on one Friday night, you go drinking and you hit 100 the next day on the Saturday. And you're like, well, I guess this is what it is. I just need to have a drink on a Friday and that's going to boost performance. I think I always say that's an overcorrection, but it kind of shows, doesn't it, that level of taking care of your well-being, switching off is going to lead to better performance. You see it when people like Conor McGregor say he was like a light switch, flicking on and off constantly, right? And it just drains your battery.
And just on that, that's something which every athlete has got to sort of watch carefully and get in that balance between preparation and well, it's all involved in your preparation in terms of what's good preparation for you. And sometimes you'll get athletes to look at their most successful periods or performances and really try and zone in about what that preparation looked like. It'll look different for other people. Some people will want to, go the extra mile to leave no stone unturned in their preparation. Some of them will see a lot of benefit in not thinking about the sport at all.
It's interesting because the type of person who is never switched off is glorified in the media. Kobe Bryant, for example, doing like the 4 hours of sleep and never stopping. And, it makes sense mathematically that, if you're spending more time doing the thing, thinking about the thing, that surely it should translate to better performance. You work with a sport and other sports, but largely with cricket, there's so many independent factors that you can't control that mean that you can be doing all the work and it just not work out for you. Do you think it's that mentality of like some people being a little bit more holistic and trying to switch off versus the other person being like on all the time is something that suits a sport, or is it more individual driven?
I think it's a bit of both. I think there's a certain type of person who wants to make sure they tick off a load of boxes for their preparation. There's the opposite of that, or somebody who doesn't feel that need so much and they back what they've done over the past certain amount of time. In terms of the actual sport, it's a good question. It's one I don't have a definite answer for. Ultimately, a lot of sports, you're trying to enter a certain state and certain mindset which allows your body to get on with the work. Terms like muscle memory, terms like flow, entering a flow state. You're ultimately just trying to not let your mind get in the way of your body. That's going to be a big focus for a lot of people in terms of their preparation, is how can I actually just not let my mind get in the way?
What you mentioned there, flow state, is such a buzzword that I think we need an entire podcast on that topic, because I think that we can have a productive conversation where people come out on the end of it with good answers for themselves. I've always seen it as, or it's always been presented to me incorrectly, as here are the things you need to do to get in a flow state, and these are just universal. And I think talking a little bit about the nuance in order to get individuals into that state and what that might mean for them will be a really interesting topic. The interesting thing with exercise, and how it crosses over, being that mental well-being, performance, I'd say one of the interesting things is to what degree those things are important, because sports psychology, the adherence side of it, is pretty much, they've already mastered that a lot of the time. To get to a high level, you have to do the adherence, don't you?
The elite athletes, I'd say it's definitely not one of the biggest issues is, are they committed? But sports psychologists now work across quite a lot of different populations, and I certainly come across that with You know, a lot of people I'm working with are 15 years old. They may say that they want to be something, but they're still figuring life out, and you know, their actions might not always align with this, you know, commitment, adherence, but they also don't know what to commit to at times. Yeah, no, it's interesting, the whole exercise psychology side of things. Obviously, the people that you work with, yeah, we've spoken before about how a massive part of your work is along that adherence, commitment side of things. You know that if they do the program, you know they'll get the results. You know, if they, you know, eat the right things and go by the script, and you could explain this better than me, but you know that you'll get the results. So ultimately, when you hop on a call with them, it's not always just talking about gym exercises, is it?
I had a real think about it before we started this, and I really think it's about 60% of a call will be about the psychology side of it. And the psychology side for exercise psych will encompass, as you mentioned, adherence. It has that mental well-being crossover, but it's largely making sure that what we're doing fits an individual's values, and they kind of fluctuate over time. Like there's these overarching values where people are like, well, I want to be in shape. I want my business to go well. I want my career to go well. I want my relationships to go well. Everyone's got like a hierarchy of importance for these, but they typically switch. They're often seasonal. I reckon with athletes, that for at least like a decade period or more, it's always going to be kind of like their top thing that they're thinking about. Whereas for me, it's like, how do we get exercise and nutrition to fit your top thing? Because getting jacked isn't most guys' top thing. They want to be jacked passively. So it makes sense to be like, well, you only have to work out 3 days a week. You can eat out, you know, at business deals, at conferences, with clients, all that stuff. But we have to fit these rules in, and the rules aren't often the same. It's like, what are your values? One of the interesting things was I had a client who loves wine, and at the beginning he was like kind of afraid to admit that I really need to keep this part of my life inside the system. And so we were building systems for weeks and weeks where it's like he feels like he's sacrificing that and he's not saying it, and simply by saying that we're able to be like, okay, we can work this in. But it's oftentimes is that cognitive dissonance between this is what I want with what I think I want, but my actions are producing something that are kind of opposite to that. And so yeah, with sports psych, often they know what they want. At 15 years old, maybe there's a bit of that conflict there, but for these guys, yeah. But these guys are like, well, everyone wants to be in shape, everyone wants to be healthy, but like there isn't, you don't land on being healthy unless you're recovering from like type 2 diabetes and trying to fix that or reduce your LDL and things like that. But you never feel like you've arrived. It's always staving it off, and that's hard to motivate people with. So it has to be passive. It has to be like okay, well, if you're eating out, here's the best choice that allows you to enjoy it, but you get closer to your goals at the same time. And that's largely a negotiation. There isn't a whole other side to it, which is the performance aspect, which again fits into the values. If getting in shape makes you perform better at work, makes you feel better, then you're going to stick to it long term. But I think that's a topic for another time. So I think we've done a pretty good job at introducing sports psych and exercise psych, and maybe we go into flow state on the next one. Henry's stuff and my stuff, links wise, will be in the description. If you want to work with Henry, feel free to message him. If you want to work with me, feel free to message me. We'll see you on the next podcast.